Every spring, wildlife rehabilitation centers in the United States take in hundreds of thousands of orphaned and injured wild animals. One center in California alone handles more than 12,000 animals a year. Fawns curled in cardboard boxes, baby raccoons in shoeboxes, nestling songbirds delivered in cupped human hands by people who found them on the sidewalk and simply couldn't leave them there. And in a strange number of these cases, the animal doesn't fight. A wild fawn, a creature whose entire evolutionary inheritance screams run from the two-legged predator, will fold its legs and let a stranger lift it. A duckling will follow a rubber boot across a parking lot. Somewhere out there, right now, a wild animal is letting a human hold its offspring, or is following one as if it were its own mother. Now try to name the last time a wolf let you approach its den, or a hawk handed you its chick. It doesn't happen. The rule across almost every wild species on Earth is brutally simple. Humans are danger, and offspring are the one thing you protect above your own life. So how do you square those two things? How can the same wild instinct that makes a mother bear lethal also, under the right conditions, collapse into a duckling trusting a man in rubber boots? That's strange if you think about it. Trust like that should get an animal killed. Natural selection should have scrubbed it out of the gene pool a million generations ago. So why is it still here? And why does it seem to switch on so easily? Start with a goose, because a goose nearly explains the whole thing. In 1935, an Austrian zoologist named Konrad Lorenz noticed that gray-lag goslings, in the first hours after hatching, don't recognize their mother by scent or shape. They recognize whatever moves near them first. Lorenz got down on the ground, and a clutch of goslings decided he was their mother. They followed him everywhere. They ignored actual geese. He'd cracked open a mechanism biologists now call imprinting, a hard-coded rule that says the first big moving thing you see is safe, is family, is home. It only stays open for a few hours, sometimes a day. Then it locks permanently. Imprinting isn't trust. It's a shortcut. A gosling doesn't have time to run a background check on the world. It just needs a mother, fast, and evolution bet that the first thing it sees would be one. That bet is right almost every time in the wild. It's only wrong when a human shows up during the window. But imprinting only explains the babies. It doesn't explain the adults, the injured hawk that stops struggling, the fox that comes back to the porch. For that, there's something else. There's a difference between taming and domestication, and almost everyone confuses them. Domestication takes thousands of years and rewrites a species' genes. Taming takes one lifetime and rewrites nothing. A tamed animal isn't a trusting animal. It's an animal whose fear has been worn down by repeated exposure without consequence. Feed a wild fox behind a cabin every night and it will stop fleeing. It hasn't decided you're safe. It's simply run the experiment enough times to lower its guard. Wildlife biologists have a colder phrase for this: habituation. The animal stops treating you as a threat because you keep failing to act like one. And here's where the trust becomes a death sentence. There's a rule in wildlife management, repeated so often it's nearly a slogan: a fed animal is a dead animal. A habituated coyote that has lost its fear of people doesn't get rehabilitated back into caution. It gets bolder. It approaches the next human and the next until one of them is frightened, and then it's the animal that pays. Yellowstone spent decades learning this with its bears. Grizzlies that learned to associate humans with food in the mid-20th century didn't become friendly neighbors. They became problem bears, and problem bears, overwhelmingly, end up shot or euthanized. The trust the animal developed is the exact thing that gets it killed. Which brings us to the grimmest example, and it involves people who were trying to help. When conservationists began breeding critically endangered whooping cranes in captivity, they hit a wall Lorenz would have recognized instantly. Chicks raised by human handlers imprinted on humans. They grew up not knowing they were cranes. They wouldn't court other cranes, wouldn't migrate, wouldn't survive in the wild. They'd walk toward people, the one thing a wild crane must never do. The fix was almost surreal. Handlers had to raise the chicks while wearing full-body white crane costumes, hiding every human feature, feeding them with puppets shaped like adult crane heads, never once letting the chick hear a human voice. An entire recovery program was built around a single, unforgiving truth that an animal's trust in humans is not a gift. It's a defect that has to be engineered out. Now, the rule isn't absolute, and the exceptions are worth facing head-on. There are famous cases of apparently spontaneous trust: a wild crow that brings gifts, a mother cat that moves her kittens onto a human's lap, an elephant that seems to bring an injured calf toward a village. Don't these break the rule? They don't. Look closely, and nearly every case is either an already habituated animal or a desperate one. The mother animal that trusts a human with her young is almost always an animal that has run out of other options. Injured, starving, or cornered, choosing the gamble of a strange giant over the certainty of losing the offspring anyway. That's not trust triumphing over instinct. That's instinct doing exactly what it's built to do, taking a long-shot bet when every safe option is already gone. The exception is the rule under pressure. And here's where human culture quietly arrived at the same conclusion, long before there were biologists to explain it. Folklore across unrelated cultures is full of the same warning. The changeling left in the crib, the fairy child you must never take in, the wild thing that comes to your door and must not be fed. Older hunting traditions, from the Arctic to the Americas, carried explicit taboos against keeping wild young as pets, not out of cruelty, but out of a hard-won understanding that an animal raised soft could neither go home nor truly stay. People encoded into story the same thing the Crane program discovered with costumes, that bridging the gap between wild and human tends to ruin the animal on both sides. So the answer isn't one thing. It's a hatchling's imprinting shortcut, stacking on top of an adult's worn-down fear, stacking on top of a desperate mother's last gamble. And every layer that looks like trust is really just an old survival rule firing in a situation evolution never planned for. The fawn in the cardboard box isn't trusting you. It's a system built for a world without humans, running one more time in a world that now has them everywhere. The duckling follows the boot because 100,000 years ago, the boot would have been its mother. The instinct was never wrong. The world just changed faster than the instinct could.